My name is Margaret. People call me Grandma Maggie now when they visit. But nobody really knows me, not even my own children, especially not them. I'm 83 years old, and I've lived through things that most people wouldn't believe. Things that sound too cruel, too twisted, too heartbreaking to be true, but they are. And I don't want to die with all this inside me. So this is my truth. All of it. I was born in 1942 in rural Kentucky, in a town so small you could walk across it in 10 minutes. My family lived in a house with no insulation, a tin roof, and wooden floors that creaked no matter how gently you stepped. My mother gave birth to 6 of us, one after another, like God was punishing her for something. My father worked at the lumber mill. He was gone during the day and drunk every night. We never hugged, never talked about feelings, never even made eye contact unless something needed fixing or someone needed punishing. I was the 3rd child, but the first daughter. My mother told me that made me special. I wish she hadn't, because to my father, special meant something else entirely. The first time it happened, I was 8 years old. It was late, long after the house had gone quiet. I remember the sound of frogs croaking outside, the moonlight slipping through the cracks in the curtains. I woke to the sound of footsteps, slow, heavy, familiar. My door creaked open. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there. Then he walked in, sat on the edge of my bed, and whispered, "You look just like your mama did when she was your age." He brushed my hair behind my ear. His breath smelled like whiskey and sweat. My body locked in place. I remember every second, every heartbeat, every time his hand moved closer to my face. He left after a few minutes that night, but he came back the next night and the night after that. By the time I turned 9, it wasn't just touching. By 10, it was routine. I tried to tell my mama once, just once. We were peeling potatoes in the kitchen. She was humming an old church song. I looked at her and whispered, "Mama, Daddy comes in my room at night." She stopped humming. Her hands froze mid-peel. Then, without looking at me, she said, "Don't you ever speak those words again. Ever." And that was it. She went back to peeling, and I went back to silence. At age 12, I got pregnant. No one asked who the father was. No one needed to. They shipped me off to Georgia to live with my Aunt Hattie for the summer. That was the story they told the neighbors. In truth, I was there to give birth, in secret, surrounded by other fallen girls, hiding their shame for their families. I wasn't allowed to hold her. They took her away the moment she was born. A girl. They didn't even let me name her. They said she'd been adopted by a good Christian couple up north. I never saw her again. When I came back home, nobody spoke about it. My brothers avoided me. My mother acted like nothing had happened. And my father, he smiled at me. That was the worst part. I stopped talking after that, completely, for nearly a year. They thought I was possessed, took me to a priest, tried holy water, exorcisms, prayer circles. But the truth is, I wasn't possessed. I was broken. At 16, my father arranged for me to marry a man named Carl. He was 32, a landowner, owned a farm 2 towns over, had money and reputation. My mother told me I was lucky. The wedding was in our backyard. I wore a white dress she'd sewn herself. No music, no dancing, just an exchange of rings and a silent ride to a new life that would soon feel like another prison. Carl was different than my father, but not better. He didn't beat me. At least, not with fists. But he knew how to destroy someone from the inside. With silence, with shame, with control. He kept a ledger of my failures. Didn't salt the potatoes. Mark. Forgot to iron his shirt. Mark. tried to speak during dinner, double mark. Each mark earned a punishment. He locked me out of the house for an entire night once, in December, in nothing but my nightgown. I slept behind the chicken coop, curled in a ball, shivering so violently I couldn't move the next morning. He fed the dogs better than me some nights, and in the bedroom. He was just as cruel. Carl didn't want just a wife. He wanted a subject, someone to own. He'd invite friends over, other men, sometimes for dinner, sometimes for cards, sometimes for me. At first I thought I'd misunderstood, that maybe they were just being friendly. Until one night Carl said, "You're going to do what I tell you, or they'll do worse." That night was the first time I thought seriously about death. By 17, I was pregnant again. A boy this time. Carl named him Mark. I wanted to name him after my grandfather, but Carl told me my family was full of filth. I had 5 children over the next 10 years. All boys: Mark, Joseph, Aaron, Caleb, Levi. I wish I could say they were my salvation. But the truth is, Carl raised them to be like him. He taught them that women were weak, that crying was betrayal, that silence was strength. By the time they were teenagers, they mocked me, called me stupid, called me a bitch. They laughed when I burned my hand on the stove and cried, and Carl just smiled. I remember once, I must have been in my late 30s, Caleb spilled milk on the floor. I told him to clean it up. He was 10. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "You clean it, bitch. That's your job." I slapped him. The only time I ever laid a hand on any of my boys. Carl beat me for it. Told me, "You don't hit my sons. You don't touch what's mine." Some nights I'd sit on the porch after everyone went to bed. I'd look at the stars and imagine what it'd be like to be free. To just walk away, vanish, become no one. But then I'd remember I had nowhere to go, no money, no friends, no voice. Even if I left, where would I go? And then something happened that I didn't expect. I got sick. I was 41. I woke up one morning and collapsed in the kitchen. Carl didn't take me to a doctor. He said I was faking it. Said I was doing it for attention. But I wasn't. A neighbor, sweet old Miss Lila, saw me crawling in the yard and called an ambulance. They took me to the hospital. I had pneumonia, advanced, nearly died, and for 2 weeks. I was free. Lying in that hospital bed, connected to tubes, coughing blood. I felt peace. No Carl, no boys, no orders, no eyes watching me. Just silence. Real silence. Not the kind that threatens. The kind that heals. The nurse's name was Angela. She was the first person in decades to speak to me like I mattered. She asked about my life. I told her nothing, but she could see it. In my eyes. In the way I flinched when someone touched me. In the way I apologized every time I asked for water. She held my hand and said, "You don't have to live like this." And something broke in me. I returned home after 17 days in the hospital. Carl hadn't visited once, neither had my sons, not even a phone call. When I walked back into the house, thin, pale, limping, it felt colder than ever. My bed smelled like mildew. My clothes were still damp in the laundry basket. No one had even bothered to move my things. It was like I never existed. Except now, something had changed in me. Angela's words echoed in my head. "You don't have to live like this." At first, I didn't believe her. I thought, what choice do I have? But then I started thinking, what if I stayed sick? What if I kept going to the hospital? What if I used that time to plan? I didn't have money. I didn't have friends. But I had time. And maybe, just maybe, I had enough strength left to do something with it. I began writing. Every night after Carl fell asleep, I'd sneak out to the back shed and write in an old notebook I found behind a stack of tools. I wrote down every horrible thing that had ever happened to me, every name, every date, every scar. I wrote until my hands cramped, until the ink bled through the pages. It became my secret, my lifeline. I hid the notebook behind the woodpile, wrapped in plastic and sealed in a tin box. If Carl found it, he'd destroy it. Or worse, destroy me. I also started keeping little scraps of money. Every time I was sent to the store, I'd lie about the cost and pocket the change. $1 here, 70 cents there. I kept it in a sock buried in the garden. Within a year, I had nearly $80. It wasn't much, but it was something. The final straw came the night Levi, my youngest, spat in my face. He was 13. I had told him to put his dishes in the sink. He said, "You don't tell me what to do, bitch." Then he leaned in and spat in my face. Carl laughed, and in that moment, I saw all of them, Carl, my sons, even my father, as one long, unbroken chain of men who had taken my life and carved it into a grave. And I made a decision. I was going to disappear. I waited for winter. December 4th, 1984. It was snowing. The boys were at school. Carl was out buying feed. I packed a bag, just clothes, my notebook, the sock of money, and a photo of the baby girl I never met. A nurse had slipped it to me after I gave birth. Just a Polaroid. No name. Just baby girl, July 16th. I walked to the Greyhound station 7 miles away. I never looked back. I rode that bus for 22 hours, from Kentucky to Georgia, to Angela. I didn't know if she'd still be there, if she'd even remember me. But when I walked into the hospital lobby, thin and shaking and half frozen, she came running from behind the desk and wrapped her arms around me. "I knew you'd come," she said. And I broke. I cried so hard, I nearly collapsed. Angela let me stay with her for 3 weeks. She gave me food, clothes, helped me find a shelter, a women's home run by a former nun, strict but kind. They gave me a bed, a therapist, a job cleaning the kitchen, and for the first time in 40 years, I felt human. I'll never forget what it was like to sleep in that bunk bed. A thin mattress, scratchy blanket, but no footsteps in the hallway, no keys turning in the door, no whispers in the dark, just silence, real silence. Over the next 5 years, I built a new life. Slowly. I worked as a cleaner, then a cook. Eventually, I got a tiny apartment with a kitchenette and a bathroom no bigger than a closet. I got my GED, took classes in secretarial work, even joined a church, one where the pastor wasn't a predator, but a person. I sent a letter to my sons, just one. I said, "I'm alive, I'm safe, I forgive you." I never got a reply. That's okay. I found real friendship in a woman named Cheryl. She was 50, divorced, and loud. She smoked menthols, swore like a sailor, and called me Queen Margaret just to make me laugh. She was the first person who ever celebrated my birthday. She brought cupcakes and sang off-key. I cried in the bathroom for an hour after. Not because I was sad, because I realized how much of my life had been stolen from me. I'm 83 now. Angela passed away last year, Cheryl the year before that. Sometimes I wonder why I outlived everyone, why God kept me here. But maybe it's this. Maybe it's to tell this story. To prove that even after the worst life imaginable, you can still survive. Even if no one claps for you, even if no one believes you, even if your own children hate you, you can still become someone. I've never seen my daughter, but every year on July 16th, I light a candle. I whisper into the flame, I loved you. I always loved you. And maybe, somewhere out there, she knows. It's been 42 years since I stepped off that bus and disappeared. 42 years of silence. 42 years of waking up without the smell of bourbon in the hallway or the feeling of ice on me through the dark. 42 years of building a life out of the ashes of someone else's horror story. But the thing about the past is, it doesn't stay buried, especially when there are people who never wanted you to survive. It began with a phone call. I had just turned 76. I was making tea in my little kitchen, humming a hymn my mother used to sing when she still believed in peace. The phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Is this Margaret Evans? My heart stopped. That name hadn't been used in decades. Yes, I said cautiously. Who's this? There was silence, then a slow inhale. You're my mother. Her name was Rachel. She was 63, and she had spent her whole life searching for me. I'm your daughter, she said, her voice cracking. I was born July 16th, 1955, Georgia. Polaroid photo. You kept it, didn't you? I nearly dropped the phone. I had kept that photo in my nightstand drawer for over half a century. Sometimes I stared at it for hours. Sometimes I held it against my chest and pretended I could hear her heartbeat. And now, she was real. She had a voice, a name, a life. We talked for 3 hours. She told me she'd been adopted by a couple in Virginia. Good people. Strict but kind. They told her early on that she was adopted, but they didn't know much about her birth mother. Only that I was very young and had no choice. She'd tried searching in her 20s and again in her 40s, but it wasn't until a DNA database reunited her with a distant cousin that she finally found a lead. Me. She wanted to meet. I was terrified. Not because I didn't want to see her, but because I didn't know how to be a mother. Especially not to the one child I never got to hold. I agreed. She flew to me, all the way from New Jersey. When she walked into the train station waiting room, I nearly collapsed. She looked like me. Same cheekbones, same eyes, same silence in her shoulders. I stood up slowly. My hands were shaking. She didn't speak. She just walked to me and hugged me. Tight. I sobbed like a child. We spent a week together. She asked questions. Some I could answer, some I couldn't. She wanted to know who her father was. I told her carefully. She went quiet for a long time. Then she said, I'm sorry. I wish I had different blood in me. I took her face in my hands and said, blood doesn't define you. Choices do, and you are nothing like him. Rachel had a daughter, my granddaughter. Her name was Elise. She was 34, married, a mother of 2. I saw pictures, smiling, bright-eyed kids, a husband who looked kind, a life I never imagined possible. Rachel didn't invite me into it, not right away, and I didn't blame her. I told her, I'm just grateful you exist. We kept in touch, phone calls, letters, small holiday cards with shaky handwriting. And for the first time in my life, I had something that felt like peace. Until the letter came. It was from Joseph, my second son. I hadn't seen or heard from him in 39 years. The envelope was plain, the handwriting was neat. Inside was a single sentence. We know where you are. No name, no returns address. But I knew. I showed it to Rachel. She urged me to report it. But to whom? There was no threat, no crime. Just 5 words designed to burn holes through everything I had rebuilt. I changed my number. I stayed inside. For the first time in decades, I checked the locks twice before bed, because now I knew they were looking for me. 3 months later, I saw a man outside my building. He stood under the street lamp, hat low, hands in his coat. He didn't move for 2 hours, just stood there, watching, waiting. I called the police. By the time they arrived, he was gone. They said it was probably nothing, but I knew better. I started sleeping with the lights on. I didn't tell Rachel. I didn't want her to worry. She had her own family, her own life. I wouldn't let my darkness leak into hers. But I started writing again, in notebooks, in margins, on receipts and napkins. My story wasn't finished yet, because they were still out there, and they still believed they owned me. One night, I received a phone call from a blocked number. I didn't answer. The voicemail was short. "We never forgot you, Mama." My knees buckled. I sat on the floor of my apartment, staring into the dark, and realized they would never stop. But I wasn't that girl anymore. Not the child locked in a basement. Not the wife silenced in her own home. Not the mother spat on by her sons. I was Margaret. I had a voice. And I wasn't afraid anymore. I went to the police, gave them everything. The letters, the voicemails, the reports from my hospital visits in the 80s. I told them everything. They opened a case, said they'd look into it. But I knew it wouldn't go anywhere. Too much time had passed. Too many names had changed. But I didn't care about justice anymore. I cared about truth. So I wrote everything down, not just in journals, but for others. I started a blog, anonymous at first, titled, "The Life They Buried Me Alive In." I wrote about the house in Kentucky, about the child I never held, about the woman who saved me, about the boys who became monsters. And people read it, hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands. Some called me a liar. Some called me brave, but one comment stood out. It read, "I think I'm your granddaughter. My dad's name is Mark. He said his mother ran away, that she was evil, but I never believed him. He's the evil one. I think you're my family." I broke down. I reached out. Her name was Kayla. She was 28, and she wanted to meet. Her name was Kayla, 28, living in Ohio, graphic designer, no kids, no marriage, just a hunger for truth that had followed her since childhood. She said she always knew something was wrong with her father, Mark. "He doesn't feel things like normal people," she said during our first call. "He acts, but he doesn't feel. I think he's done terrible things. I don't even know what, but I feel it." My heart ached. She told me about her childhood, how Mark would disappear for days, how he once threw her kitten in a freezer as a joke, how he screamed at her for crying, how she'd wake up some nights and find him just standing in her doorway, staring. "I'm scared of him," she whispered. "I always have been." I closed my eyes. That monster, my son, had made a new victim, and she'd escaped, just like me. We met in person 3 weeks later. It was surreal. She looked nothing like her father, softer, kinder. Her voice shook when she spoke, but her eyes held fire. "I'm sorry," I said the moment I saw her. "For what?" "For not being there." "You survived," she said. "That's enough." We sat in a small cafe. I told her about her grandfather, her uncles, her mother, her aunts. I told her things no one had ever heard, things I hadn't even told Rachel. She didn't flinch. She listened. She held my hand. And then she said something that pierced my chest. "You broke the chain. I didn't understand." "You stopped it," she explained. "It would have kept going if you hadn't left, if you hadn't disappeared. Maybe I'd be like him. Maybe I'd be hurting people too. But I'm not. Because of you." That night, I lay awake in bed and cried for every version of myself I'd ever hated. The broken little girl, the voiceless bride, the silenced mother, the runaway, because for the first time I understood. Surviving isn't weakness, it's defiance. Kayla visited me often after that. She helped me clean, showed me how to use email, helped me edit my blog posts. One day she said, "You should record your story." I'm not much of a speaker. Doesn't matter. People need to hear it. And so we did. She brought her laptop and a microphone. We sat at the kitchen table. She hit record, and I spoke. It took 3 days. I told everything. From my earliest memories to my escape. From Rachel's voice on the phone to the letter from Joseph. From the man under the streetlight to the blog that saved me. And when I was done, she uploaded it. Anonymous. No photos. Just the voice of a woman whose life was supposed to end in silence. It went viral. Millions listened. Comments poured in. Survivors. Fighters. People who thought they were alone. People who said, "You told my story. I finally feel seen." I thought I was the only one. I wasn't just writing for myself anymore. I was writing for them. But then, the threats returned. Emails. Voicemails. "You're ruining our family name. You think people care about your sad little story? You'll regret opening your mouth." Kayla wanted to report it. I told her not to. I said, "They don't scare me anymore." But the truth was, they did. Not for myself, for her. Then, one day, I opened my front door and found Mark standing on my porch. He stood there, silent. Mark, my first son, the boy I carried for 9 months, the boy I fed, rocked to sleep, kissed on the forehead before Carl erased whatever softness I'd given him. He was taller than I remembered, broader, but his face was the same, cold, unreadable, like stone. I hadn't seen him in 43 years, and now he stood on my porch like death in denim. I gripped the doorframe so hard my knuckles turned white. "Mark," I whispered. He didn't answer, just stared. Then finally, "You made us a joke." His voice was deeper than I expected. Rough, hollow. "You told lies about us," he said. "About Dad. About me. About the family." I stayed quiet. "What do you want?" I asked. He stepped closer. "I want you to stop." "Stop what?" "The blog. The interviews. That voice recording." He spat the word like poison. "You made me look like a monster." I looked him dead in the eyes. "You made yourself that." He flinched. For a second, just a flicker, I saw the little boy he used to be. The boy who clung to my skirt, who giggled when I made pancakes, who begged me not to leave when Carl yelled. But it was gone in an instant. Now he was just another ghost, a product of the man who raised him, and the silence that let it happen. "People talk," he said. "My job, my neighbors. You humiliated me." "I survived you," I said calmly. "That's not humiliation. That's truth." His eyes darkened. His jaw clenched. "I could end it all right now," he said softly. I didn't move. "Then do it." We stood in silence. 10 seconds. 20. A full minute. Then he stepped back. "You're lucky you're old," he muttered. "Otherwise I'd..." "You'd what?" I asked. "Be your father? Hit me? Silence me? Sell me off like cattle?" He turned away. I didn't stop him. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling for hours, heart pounding, breath short, but not from fear, from grief, because I realized I had lost all of them. Every son, not just to Carl, but to silence, to generational rot, to the disease of men who never learned love, only control. 2 days later, a reporter called. They wanted to run my story in full. National press, real names, real photos. I hesitated, but then Kayla came over, held my hand, and said, "Your life saved mine. Let it save more." So I said yes. The article exploded. Headline: I survived my family. The hidden life of Margaret Evans. Pictures, audio, court documents, my original notebooks. Mark was named, so were Carl, Joseph, Levi, Caleb, Aaron. Not to destroy them, but to warn others. Within days, women came forward, neighbors, old classmates of my son's. One woman said Aaron tried to corner her in a locker room at 16. Another said Joseph forced her into his truck behind a bar in 1992. A third said nothing. Just sent a photo of her arm, covered in scars. It wasn't just my story anymore. It was a reckoning. Police reopened investigations. Nothing came of it. Statute of limitations, missing evidence, but the shame stuck. The illusion shattered. My sons disappeared from their jobs, moved, changed numbers, and for the first time, I wasn't the one hiding. A year passed. Rachel came to visit, brought Elise, brought the great-grandkids. We sat on my couch, 4 generations, side by side. We laughed, took photos. They called me Nana. When I kissed their cheeks goodnight, I didn't cry. I just smiled, because I was there, alive, present, real. Kayla started a foundation in my name, the Maggie Project, for women fleeing abuse. She runs it to this day. Dozens of women now have shelter, education, and safety because of that little sock I buried in a Kentucky garden. Some nights, I still wake up in a sweat. I still hear footsteps in the hallway, still flinch when someone knocks too hard. But I breathe. I remind myself, I'm not there anymore. I am here. I survived. Last week I turned 83. The nurses at my care home brought cake. Rachel came. Elise FaceTimed me. The great-grandkids sang off-key and spilled juice everywhere. And I blew out the candles. All 8 of them. One for each decade, and one for every time I thought I wouldn't make it. So this is my story. Not because I want pity, not because I need applause, but because there's another woman out there, right now, hiding in her own home, clutching a secret she thinks no one will believe. And I want her to hear this. I believe you. I see you. You are not alone. This is Margaret Evans, born 1942, survivor, mother, fighter, still here, still breathing, still free,